Greetings, everyone. We've got about another minute before the webinar starts. So just please stand by and we'll start right at the top of the hour. All right, Mark, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you to all of you for being here today. We've got a fantastic panel filled with some agency experts, some of the best in the industry, and we'll get to introductions here in a second. Just want to do a few housekeeping things before we get started. Today's session is being recorded, so everyone that is registered will get a recording of this session. If you would like, you can also get a PDF of our slides. Small disclaimer, if you do decide to get the slides, we do suggest that you listen to the speaker with the corresponding slides just for some context. Otherwise, it might not make sense if you're looking at a slide just filled with pictures. If you have any questions, please use the question and answer function with Zoom. We will try and answer your questions either during the presentation or afterwards, but we'll try and get to those questions as soon as possible. Let's start introductions with AIM High's president. Rob, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and also explain what AIM High is and what we do.
Good morning, everybody. From the left coast, Rob Lawrence, and I'm the Director of Strategic Implementation for Pro EMS and the Pro group of companies, including Prodigy, and delighted to be the President of AIM High. We are a high-value, high-performance association and organisation with some very, very well-known member companies, but if you would like to come and join AIM High, we'd be delighted to talk to you and we can share our mission, vision and values with you. Matt and I are always available to have that conversation. As you can see on the screen, these are our member organizations from both the US and indeed north of the border in Canada. So that's us, and we'd be delighted to talk to you, Mark.
Okay, let's continue with our introductions. Adam, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
Thanks, Mark. My name is Adam Paluca. I am the Chief Public Affairs Officer for EMSA, the Emergency Medical Services Authority, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
And I am Mark Tenya. I am the Public Relations Manager for the Richmond Ambulance Authority serving Richmond, Virginia. I've been doing this for about 7 years. Prior to this, I was a television reporter for over 10 years. I'm happy to be in this role and doing good work with our EMS providers. Matt?
Matt Savatsky, currently with PWW Advisory Group. For 16 years, I was also the PIO, amongst other things, for MedStar Mobile Healthcare, the public utility model system in Fort Worth. And we did a lot of work with our community. So we're going to share some of that information with you as we go. So Mark, take it away to the first question, if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah, we've got a lot of topics, but we're going to start with one of the most direct ways that you can communicate with the public, with elected officials, appointed officials, your partners, and that's through community events, whether you're organizing or you are just participating in a community event. Matt, let's start with you. What are some of the things that you all did at MedStar, and how did that end up benefiting your agency?
You know, Mark, one of the best programs that we've ever done, and we did it for 9, 10 years, was our trick or treat event. You know, many ambulance providers have learned about Home for the Holidays, where they take people home at Thanksgiving. Well, we did a little different twist on that. And we decided to take children who might not normally have the opportunity to go trick-or-treating because they're on ventilators or they have significant medical issues or just what they need constant medication infusion. Well, we have resources for them. So we started a program called MedStar Trick or Treat, and we partnered with a neighborhood that is the best neighborhood in all of Fort Worth to go trick or treating. Thousands of people go there. They did a special night just for our kiddos. And these are kids that sadly, within a year or two of them being taken trick or treating with their entire family, most of these children eventually did pass away. But that's okay because that's part of why we did it. And the families were so appreciative. And this became a media darling and a community darling for us because every September we would send out the nominations, and the media and social media would cover, hey, nominations are open for the MedStar Trick or Treat program. And we would get a ton of applicants for kids that wanted to go. We'd have a committee that would pick we started with one or two children. At one point, we were taking three because there were three really worthy kids. But to watch these kids going door to door in this neighborhood with their family, the ambulance crew dressed up, the ambulance completely decorated, going trick or treat with these kids that have IVs running and on ventilators was just fantabulous. Another one that we did that worked out really well was leveraging, and this is really good for EMS providers now, especially today's environment, is doing community stop the bleed, Narcan, and CPR training. Free class. When we did this, we started it right after the Uvalde shooting. And in one day, Mark, in one day, we trained 800 people that came to MedStar's headquarters and went through different stations and learned Narcan, stop the bleed, hands only CPR. And that really builds up your reputation in the community. And it was really fantastic. So those were like our two premier types of community events.
And I noticed that with these community events, it's going beyond just the community event because you're obviously getting coverage as well. And that goes beyond just the participants. Um, Working with the media and getting these community events covered, just in your experience, how beneficial was that in expanding the reach of the goodwill that you're buying?
Holy crap. I'm sorry, holy moly. It truly is exponential, Mark, because when the media covers it, and we'll actually post some of this on Aim High's website, some of the media clips. There were news outlets that literally came to our headquarters the week before, and the entire morning show, the 2 hours that they were on the air, they would cut away to MedStar's headquarters and they would teach different segments during the morning news on Stop the Bleed, Narcan administration, hands only CPR. The media would ride with us with the family's permission when we did the trick or treat program. And it was always, again, the 10 o'clock news on Halloween. Everybody's in front of the television with their tissues because of the amazing stories on the media and just the great community relations that those events brought.
Yeah, and we're talking about not just thousands of people. When we're talking about Fort Worth, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people that you're reaching with one event that you're doing. And so, those are great examples of how you can just not only organize the event and you're not just communicating there face to face, but you're also reaching a larger audience by expanding those efforts. And I noticed that when you're doing these events, I saw some fantastic photos of those events that you did. I think one of the important things when we're talking about organizing community events or participating in community events, that takes a lot of work. You do a lot of work beforehand before you actually get to the event. And when you are doing that, there's a lot of promotion that goes into that, not just beforehand, but also during the event. And if you're not properly promoting yourself, then you kind of are not equaling the effort that you did ultimately to organize those events or participate in those events. Rob, I know that you are very good when it comes to social media and promoting beforehand, during, afterwards, when it comes to the events that we're talking about. What are some of the things that agencies should take into consideration and keep in mind when they are not just organizing and doing all that work, but you have to put just as much effort into making sure you're properly promoting it and that you're showing a good image when you're doing these things?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And image is everything out there. And we all have a camera now. We all have the ability to create images and photographs of our organization. But sometimes we make a few sort of basic mistakes. And let me give you a few examples. So if you want to just sort of scroll through the slide deck. So here's the first one. And this is a great photograph of a Richmond ambulance provider. But also think about when you're taking a photograph, thinking about perspective, because of course we've got the great image there, but also we don't see the full truck. So if you just pull back a little bit, Mark, and let's pull back a little bit, what you have is actually the perspective of a provider with a better backdrop. So we all tend to hug the vehicle we're going to stand next to or hug the wall that we're against. have a think about what the finished photograph is going to look like. And then you can create an image such as this, where you've got the perspective and the depth of the photo. So it's just a case of bringing your subject forward away from the ambulance, which is where we normally take our photographs such as this. And then you have a great photograph. And as you can see from this one, there's also a bit of bokeh, a bit of soft focus in there too. So you've got a great photograph of the provider and a great backdrop. So just think about depth and also just bringing the subject away from the background, as it were. Thanks, Mark. Next one up. Next up, of course, again, think about the background. Sometimes you want to pull in tight on somebody. And so this is myself and Jimmy Pearson from AIM High Member Medic up on Capitol Hill a few weeks ago. And the assembly member that we were visiting was exceptionally proud of all the builds that he'd passed. And so therefore we said, can we take a photograph in front of this picture wall, this frame wall? And so whilst we aren't dominating the photograph, we are, of course, in the middle third of the photo. But the background, of course, is around that. And of course, when we put that on social media, we get the hits, the elected member gets the hits. And of course, it's a great memento, the fact that we're celebrating something that they've achieved. And obviously, we spend a lot of time lobbying on Capitol Hill. And so there's another example of, think about what's behind you in order to portray the story. Okay, next up. Now, we always do this at conferences because we're actually also shy photographers. And so when we go to a conference, we stand at the furthest place back and we take a photograph. And inevitably, there's going to be a row of chairs because the other thing that us humans don't do is like to sit at the front in conferences. And so you have to think about, if you're going to promote, here's my speaker at a conference, here's me attending a conference, think about how you compose the photo. So I think we've got a couple of examples of, empty chairs, and here's Matt. And so what I've done here is actually, instead of being, or in fact, here's Matt talking to a row of empty chairs. All right. That photograph is a great photograph of Matt, but actually what it portrays is the room is empty. So let's carry on again.
But it really portrays his Minnie Mouse, right? Let's be fair.
Okay. And also, here's the other thing about the photograph. Think about the background. Matt was standing in front of a complete section of booze there. So that was the raffle that was coming up. But you have to think about the background too and the contents of the background. Okay, let's move on again. And again, here we have Danielle Thomas talking to semi-filled room. Okay, again, think about the image that it portrays. And again, Mark. So hopefully this should be, and here's Steve Graff from Royal Ambulance again. 1/3 of the room is empty, 1/3 of the room is full. So again, think about how we do this. So let's pull the photograph in a little bit and make our subject speak to a room of people. All right, so that's the first lesson. Second one, here we go. So what I always do at a conference is, if I realize people are either not sitting at the front or all sitting at the back, etc., I'll actually go up behind folk and find the interesting heads looking at the speaker. Again, it now portrays the fact that your speaker is speaking to somebody, speaking to an audience. Next up. Again, here's a keynote from a conference. As opposed to the millions of empty seats on the left, let's pull in on the person and some of the slides behind him. Again, it's just about thinking about that shot, just about not being the shy photographer at the back of the room, but actually taking a second to get an image that's going to actually capture the emotion and the feeling of what's going on. And again, here's Matt again. I've now eliminated the empty seats and I've eliminated the booze. And here's Matt really being emotive and actually talking and engaging the audience. And so that's a great Matt photograph, great Matt action shot there.
And to be fair, Rob is spot on. And having been in many of those rooms when he was taking those pictures, those seats were filled, but there was nobody in the front row, nobody in the second row. So he is spot on with the image that he's talking about. So really, really good counsel.
And to be fair to Matt, I did say I'm going to take good photographs and bad photographs today to use in this presentation. So Matt was fully aware of what I was up to, by the way. So again, just to finish off, and the final point is headshots for your website or for when you're putting in for a magazine article. Not so much this particular headshots here, but make sure you have a professional headshot to use and not the clip from your spring break weekend or that long holiday in Cancun when you're with the folk. Get a professional headshot done. You can get some pretty good results from an iPhone or a similar modern phone, but just don't crop something out that looks awkward and awful. So there you go. Those are my top photography tips for today, Mark.
And Rob, I know that when we're talking about this, and I was thinking about this topic today, this is used in all aspects of our lives. I mean, think about if you're going on vacation and you're trying to figure out where you want to stay, or if you're trying to go to a restaurant and trying to figure out which restaurant you want to go to. how important is our pictures in a role of deciding where you're going to stay or where you're going to go eat? And the same thing applies to EMS. When it comes to the optics, it's very important. And like we were talking about before, just to bring it back, it's not just community events because there's so many things that we do in EMS, and pictures play such an important role. And you can't be shy, like you just mentioned, because it will communicate to the public something either positive or negative, depending on
Yeah.
what the picture that you take. You know, you show those empty seats. As a viewer, what do you think people would take away if what you're showing are empty seats and just using those bad examples?
Yeah. And finally, of course, folk that are watching this, we're using a lot of images from our own websites. And of course, now that you've had this sort of the chat, obviously look at how the photographer has now framed the images that you see in the examples of our social media use and obviously this presentation.
Yeah, you want to project success, you want to project a good image, and a lot of that comes down to the pictures that you're actually taking and editing and putting out there. And so doing all that work, doing all the work organizing and participating, it really does you no good, and you're kind of cutting yourself off at the knees if you're not doing just as much effort or putting just as much effort into taking those pictures and publishing them. Let's move on to traditional media, and how we use traditional media, the relationships that we build with traditional media, and how they benefit our agencies. And let's go let's go to Adam with this. And I know that you all have done a lot of things to push newsworthy events and develop those relationships with your media partners. And tell us about some of the things you all have done and how that is benefited your agency.
Yeah, Mark, like you, I am a journalism survivor. I spent 6 years as a TV reporter and anchor, and I understand the mentality of newsrooms. But during a particularly difficult time for EMSA, we were getting a lot of negative coverage. We felt like we weren't able to sort of cut through some of the narrative. So we decided to go where the media was. We contacted every TV station in the Tulsa and Oklahoma City markets and asked if we could bring some food and attend their morning and afternoon editorial meetings. So a total of 16 meetings. Every single station said, yes, please. It was an opportunity for us to have a casual conversation with tangible results. We also had the opportunity to hand out our media and HIPAA policy, hand out our HIPAA release form, and also, just reiterated that if we post something on social media, please feel free to use that. You don't need to ask for permission. If you want to do something more like interview the medic or come and get some video, we're happy to facilitate that. The next slide is going to show what we presented to them. So we talked about some realities related to transport volume. We really tried to reset the narrative and not really focus on COVID and how COVID was affecting our operations, but really move from a tactical place to a strategic place and let those journalists into the discussions of how we were going to get better. We also talked about how they could use us for stories, just like almost every company out there, we were affected by supply chain shortages, and it was hard to get ambulances that we had ordered 2 years ago to the delivery standpoint. Reminding them if there's an incident on Monday Night Football where a player needs CPR, we're happy to do a story the next day on hands-only CPR and how easy it is to learn hands-only CPR. We had some really tangible outcomes from those visits. We had a steep decline in negative stories. We had a really large increase in just neutral stories, just, getting EMSA mentioned with other agencies who were responding to emergencies. And then just outreach from reporters, hey, my story fell through. Is there anything happening at EMSA that I could come out? Of course. We were in the process of switching the design of our ambulances. And so one question that we got was, hey, is there any way we could just come out and get some video of the new ambulance design so we're not using B-roll from 2012? We actually had that B-roll ready for them. So we sent them about 2 minutes of B-roll of EMSA units in Oklahoma City and EMSA units in Tulsa that they were free to use. We also did red lights and sirens, interior, exterior, just anything that could be at their fingertips. We also reminded them that, usually in the midst of a weather emergency, it's tough for us to be able to do interviews, but we will always make ourselves available preemptively so that they can come out and get some evergreen stuff to use throughout that weather event. We had about 250 negative media stories between January 1st of 2020 and July 1st of 2023. It was not good. But since that time, we really have sort of turned the tide, and we've had more than 200 positive media stories. And we really did celebrate our achievements. We celebrated achieving priority one response time compliance in Oklahoma City for the first time in a long time. We celebrated getting whole blood on our units. And because we had developed those relationships with the media, they didn't just say, oh yeah, we can just, we can make that a reader or just a story with copy and no video. They felt strongly enough to come to those media events because we had spent the time to come to them in their newsroom. We also had two big projects. So one of them was EMS Advantage, our in-house EMT training program, which has been amazing. And being able to frame that as a workforce development story has really been a boon for EMSA because we're being seen holistically, not just merely as a entity that's treating patients on the scene and transporting them to the hospital. We developed a 360 simulation training room, and we branded it the EMSA SimTep, Simulation Training for EMS Professionals. We had a large ribbon cutting in Oklahoma City, invited the media. We had the assistant city manager for Oklahoma City. We had several EMSA trustees. We had city councilors, just to be able to highlight the technology that we're using. It was unlike anything the reporters had seen. It was unlike anything the community had seen. And it shows that we are on the cutting edge and we are willing to invest in resources to train our team to be the best possible EMS providers that they can be. We also found new ways to reach our stakeholders, and stakeholders are so important because a lot of times they think they know what's happening at EMSA, but they don't know the breadth and the 360 view. So we started doing quarterly newsletters to our stakeholders, and we include the media on these. So each quarter they're getting sort of a roundup of what's happening locally. So you see, we've highlighted SimTep. We celebrate our educational achievements. We also geofence paid social posts around municipal buildings and sometimes around news organizations, just so that we can get those great stories in front of them in a way that it's not an email that they're getting, it's not a phone call. This is happening within Instagram or Facebook or platform that they're using, and they're seeing this positive coverage.
Adam, you really highlight something that's really important, and that is availability and pushing information out. One of the things that we heard all throughout the time that I was at MedStar was they always had one number to call. Now, it could have been me, could have been someone who was covering whatever, but one number to call, someone's always going to answer. One text message, someone's always going to answer. And that helps build that relationship with a reporter, with an assignment editor, with a producer, because they know if they reach out, they're going to get an answer back. And so often they have told us that they feel frustrated with other agencies because it might be 30, 60 minutes or never that they hear back from other agencies. But if you're responsive to them, you end up on the news a lot.
Matt, also, if I can, let me talk about sweeps for a second. And sweeps are the mechanism by which news outlets get their own ratings. And of course, one of the things that they do is to create a hard-hitting big story. And I'm sure that Adam and Mark have been on the other end of this, where leading up to a sweeps period, they're going to start researching and looking for stories that are going to be, going to attract the ratings, and they can be really, really good or really, really, heartwarming and bad. And so one of the things that I certainly employed with people like Mark Tenier, who at my time at Richmond was the journalist on the other side of the fence, was to say, I know you've got sweeps coming up. Let me help you with some great stories. And just so you know that the next sweeps period for 2025 is October the 30th to November the 20th. And so you should be thinking now, what story can I give our local news outlets? For example, let's put some GoPros on an ambulance and look at how other road users react to ambulances that are on lights and sirens. We always know that the road user will always pull over at the most awkward, inappropriate place on the street. So think about how you can craft some good stories to make sure that you are, you know, on the menu and not being consumed. Matt?
And Mark, back to you, sir.
Yeah, and I do want to just touch on one thing, and Adam can probably relate as a surviving reporter. When you're building that trust and that relationship with reporters, that doesn't only help you promote good stories, but in my experience, it also can help you keep bad stories out of being covered or off air. In my experience, I've had reporters who had an idea of what they thought a story was and reached out. We had a veteran investigative reporter who reached out and did a FOIA request that was very extensive. And I knew exactly what she was going for and what type of story she thought she had. And I also knew that the facts didn't match what she was being told by someone else. And so I was able to have a conversation with her and let her know, I know exactly what you're going after here, but here are the facts, and what you're going after does not match up with reality. As a reporter, the PR people that I did not trust, I would not have listened to them. And I would have aggressively continued to go after that story, regardless of what they said. But there were PR people that I did trust. And because I trusted them, if they told me, hey, this is not matching up with what you're being told, I trusted them. So I wouldn't go down that path because I knew ultimately I didn't want to report something that was not true or inaccurate. But it comes down to building that relationship and making sure that they know that even in bad times, you're going to be there, you're going to provide good information, you're going to be objective, and that you're not going to shy away from those things. But you have to have that transparency. You have to have that trust so that when something doesn't align, they won't go forward with it because they know you've never burned me in the past, and they trust you that you're going to come forward even if it's bad information. And Adam, I don't know if you've had any experiences like that.
Yeah, I also think it's important when you're dealing with the media. If something went wrong, you got to own it. You can't try to hide something, especially if they have video of it. I think that sometimes, we always worry about, well, how is this going to look? And, you don't want a story that could have a 1 day life cycle turn into a 1 month life cycle. And it's getting mentioned repeatedly day after day because you didn't handle it honestly to begin with. EMSA as a public trust, we are beholden to open records and FOIA requests. And more than anything, though, it's being able to craft a message that A, shows accountability, and B, gives whatever incident some context. So, a lot of them for us are sometimes, motor vehicle accidents involving an ambulance. But when we're able to say that, all of our fleet, does enough miles to circle the globe 8 times, and this was one, that's context that they wouldn't know, that really puts into perspective what they're seeing. And also, I think that, like Mark said, being able to kind of squash a story that is coming from a place of assumption rather than a place of fact. Because if you're able to say, have I ever led you astray? Or, you know me, I would be right there with you if this was something that was accurate.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't know, Ron, Matt, do you have anything to add when it comes to traditional media, your experiences?
No, I think I back up everything you've said. Of course, Mark, as you know, during my 10 years in Richmond, I went out of my way to make sure that the relationships with our reporters, whether they were the veterans or indeed, the cub reporter that's coming onto site for the first time, make sure that the introduction was good. They got a solid tour, they got a solid understanding of where we were. And obviously, as Adam has just said, that sometimes it's on us and we have to own it straight away. And I can't really, that would be my major talking point for this segment.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to touch on that Adam mentioned, and Rob, as you're mentioning your work here in Richmond, is the ability to say yes and your availability. One thing I knew when I was in the media was if I called Richmond Ambulance Authority, someone was going to pick up, and I was going to get someone on camera fairly quickly. Um, just being able to pick up the phone, as Matt mentioned, just being able to make it very easy for the media goes such a long way, because they are on deadline. They do have just a limited amount of time to get those stories out there. And if they know you are easy to work with, if they know that you are consistent, they know that you're going to be there, that is a huge, huge um, weight off of their backs when it comes to doing stories, which means you're going to get those phone calls. And I point this out to our folks all the time. There are 8 different organizations around our area that could do this, provide the same information and do the same stories. There's a reason that they come to us repeatedly,
Right.
and it's because of our availability. It's because we say yes, and it's because we have people that are well spoken and coached up very well and very good at what they do, and don't take that for granted. Because if you don't do that, there are 8 other places they can go to, and if they find another place that's easier to work with, now you're out of the circulation. Now you're no longer getting as many phone calls as you were getting before. And now it just makes it that much harder to build that goodwill, not just with reporters, but also the public that you serve.
Actually, let me add to that, Mark, that also not only what you've done in Richmond is not only having the talking head, so the person that's there for when you have to respond for something that's, you know, serious and perhaps on you, but also you developed a bank of SMEs that can talk to camera, whether that's the CPR instructor, whether it's the supervisor, etc., talking about, you know, hot weather, cold weather, etc. So you've invested time in your people to actually let the provider be the spokesperson, which adds to credibility as well.
Multilingual provider.
Yes.
See.
And you also want to be able to coach your people up. You want to make sure, because I've had folks that their first interview, they were willing, but they may have not had all the necessary skills to do that. And if you keep coaching them and building them, they get better and better and better, which is great for them. It's great for your agency. And it's also great for the media because now you have someone that's polished. And I have one of our providers that I can say, go ahead and do this interview. And I don't have to say, I don't have to do a pre-interview with them. They're ready to go. They're good to go. And if you can find those participants, you know who your rock stars are within your agency, use them, utilize them. Because again, when those phone calls come in, they want someone that's polished, that sounds good, that knows what they're doing, that can talk in sound bites. It just makes their job that much easier. And if anything you can do to make the reporter's job easier makes you valuable to them and makes you an asset, and ultimately helps you reach those goals. So that's another thing I've just mentioned is make sure you're coaching your people and getting them prepared because you want this to be as easy as possible. So you're getting those phone calls repeatedly. Let's go ahead and move on to politics. I know that one of the things, it doesn't really matter what kind of agency you have, you are going to have some interaction with elected or appointed officials. And you want to build those relationships as much as you can. And I know, Adam, you guys have done a fantastic job building relationships with some of the officials in your locality. What are some of the things you all have done and how have they benefited your agency?
Yeah, so in my view, like a relationship is like a house plant. Like it does need some care and it does need to be able to check, you need to be able to check in, especially when there are major changes. So EMSA underwent a really dynamic shift in the structure of our organization in 2020. We previously had an operations contractor. EMSA, as the authority, managed that contract, and we reported to a board of trustees in our beneficiary cities in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. Well, at the end of 2020, the contractor left the system and EMSA was doing direct operations for the first time in its history. That is a huge change from what our cities were used to. All the providers always wore the EMSA uniform, so it wasn't as big of a shift for the community, but it was a shift for EMSA, for our first response partners, and for the cities we serve. So, we had a lot of media attention surrounding that. It was in the middle of COVID. There were some, concerns related to response time compliance. So there were a lot of stories about this, and we needed to do a better job at that time of managing those relationships and of making sure that our elected officials weren't finding out about anything related to EMSA in the news. Because our stakeholders saw we a leadership shakeup. We had a new CEO in January of 22. We had the different organizational structure. Compliance was just in a free fall, and it seemed like every month when we thought, well, it can't get worse than this, it did get worse. There was the EMS staffing conundrum. A lot of folks blame that on COVID, but we had to take some accountability for some of the inaction that happened under previous leadership. Eventually saying COVID, 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 it becomes, sort of people tune it out. So providing them with data related to staffing was important. But we really we needed to kind of reset those relationships with the cities of Tulsa and Oklahoma City and articulate our value to the cities, our patients, and sort of do a heavy reset. As I said, we had so many negative media stories. I think if you click it'll go through them. But as you can see, no organization wants to have these headlines or these social media posts. But we were not doing a good job of aggressively counteracting the narrative that was starting to bubble up in the community. So in 2022, as I said, we had a new CEO, and we really went from a tactical place to a strategic place. And the CEO and I and the rest of the members of the senior leadership team, we really made it a really conscious decision to work together to reshape the narrative about EMSA, to build better relationships and to articulate our value. I, as one person, could not do that. My CEO, as one person, could not do that. It really had to be a collective effort. And as we started to kind of look at what we wanted this strategy, to build upon, we needed help. But that doesn't mean that we hired 3 people because time was of the essence. We leaned into firms, having firms assist us. I don't know, the structure of all of the attendees on the call, but, if you have some additional money and you're looking for a thought partner who can help be sort of a voice of reason, take a look at who are some of the firms who are working with the cities you serve, and they can probably help you direct and build a strategy. We also decided that, when we articulate our value to the cities, we kind of needed a third-party independent voice to back up the stuff we were saying. We couldn't just do anecdotal, no, citizens love us, patients appreciate us. So we had one of Oklahoma's most noted pollsters who does a lot of political polling in the state conduct robust brand affinity and resident satisfaction surveys in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. So if you go to the next slide, I believe it's, we were able to showcase, sort of what does the community think about us? And all of those elected officials, they rely on his polls to tell them if they're going to get elected or not. So they already bought into, okay, great. Yeah, we know Pat. We trust Pat. It's not inexpensive, but the value of having that independent third-party validation of your affinity in the communities is priceless. We also decided that we wanted to try and determine what was our economic impact in the state of Oklahoma. We had done some really robust educational offerings in 2022 with our EMS Advantage EMT training program. And we had done a large scale wage and salary study, and it increased wages and salaries. So we had Dr. Russell Evans, he's a partner and chief economist at the Thorberg Group, do about a 45 to 60-day study of EMSA and then produce an economic impact report that said that we, annually drive $202 million worth of economic impact in Oklahoma.
Well, that is brilliant stuff that you guys did at EMSA. I mean, I'm actually very jealous and want to steal some of these ideas for our agency because you're building partnerships with trusted people that the elected officials trust, which also helps build that relationship between your agency and the elected official. And I imagine that with all these things you guys have done, if you make a phone call to one of these elected officials, it's going to be answered and you can actually present some information you have because you've built that trust. It kind of goes to what we were talking about before with reporters, is building that trust with the elected official in order to get them to actually not just look at your facts and figures, but trust your facts and figures. Because so many times you can present good information and good info, but if it's not being received and it's not trusted, then it doesn't really go anywhere. It doesn't really benefit your agency.
Yeah, and I mean, if you have, a group of city officials and three of them love you and three of them aren't sure, maybe don't like you, and four of them are neutral, spend your time driving the four who are neutral to loving you. Don't spend your time and energy on the three who dislike you, because chances are they are so entrenched in their belief that they eventually might turn, but you're going to spend 5 times the effort on those three as you would on the four who are neutral. So that was really our strategy, and also treating the elected officials as somebody who wants to know, not necessarily as somebody who has to know. So sharing information with them off cycle. Just say, hey, Counselor Stevens, we were at a community event this Saturday in your district, took a couple of shots of the ambulance and the medics, wanted to pass them along. Making those little warm touches is really impactful.
Rob?
Mark, if I can, yeah, I was going to just sort of throw in a favorite CEO of mine always talked about the fact of you need to know how many people it takes to vote you off the island, and I think that's kind of paraphrasing what Adam just said. Know the folk that can actually make the difference, count the votes before you go in. However, my main point of sort of jumping in here, and I've been sort of doing politics professionally now for the last 5 years at state and federal level, is the fact that data has to be absolute, is our favorite four-letter word, and going into meetings and using the words, when they say how much or how many, using the words a lot, many, or my most distastefully used word multiple, which I've banned, by the way, and Chip Decker's listening and knows this. Actually, you have to go in with the numbers and researched, not just saying we are a lot or we're far away from target. You have to go in with accuracy of data and information and numbers, because that's what's going to get the results and sway the story.
And one of the things that I also love about your presentation, Adam, is that you all were proactive, and you didn't wait for somebody to request this information. You didn't wait for somebody to say, well, what is your value to the community? How much does the community trust you? You took the action and the initiative to go out there and find that information out from trusted sources to provide to elected officials. And when it comes to developing those relationships, regardless of who it is, whether it's partners, elected officials, appointed officials, or the media, you have to be proactive. And Matt, I know at MedStar, you all were very proactive when it came to either education for candidates or inviting city council members for survivor reunions. What are some of the things you all did at MedStar that show that you were proactive in making sure that you put yourselves in front of those people?
Support their causes, make sure that they're never surprised with bad news. So be the first to tell them if something bad has happened or may happen. But I think, Mark, one of the greatest things that we did was when candidates were running for office, because much like EMSA in Oklahoma City, we're a public authority, just like Richmond, public authority. So we couldn't do a lot of the things that private organizations or that unions can do or other things. So we had to be very transparent, very educationally focused. So we would reach out to every candidate for elected office, city council, mayor, whatever it is, invite them to come to MedStar for an hour to learn how the system works, because it's complicated, right? Any EMS system, especially for elected official, is kind of complicated. So invite them in. They spend an hour. We give them a tour. We let them meet some of the folks. Give them a little background, performance measures, etc. Some of the challenges and some of the great things. But then say, would you like to do a ride along? And we put them on at a different time, typically with a field supervisor, and they spend as long as they want, 3 hours. In some cases, they spent full 12 hours in a supervisor's truck responding to calls, going to the ERs, seeing our crews. And whether or not that candidate gets elected is at that point sort of irrelevant. This person is active in the community. If they get elected, great. They know a lot about MedStar. If they don't get elected, they're one of our advocates. And they may run next time. So that was one of the great things, and this is an example of one that we did recently, and actually Alan got elected. But just reach out, give them that education, help them understand your system. It reaps huge rewards, and in almost every case, even in the mayor's case, when they finished with that observation, that educational process, we're exchanging cell phone numbers, we're doing all sorts of things. So it's an incredible relationship builder.
Matt, let me just add one thing. And Jimmy Pearson and I were on the Hill a few weeks ago, and we asked one of our elected officials, what's the one thing when you visit that really turns you off and doesn't endear you to our cause? And the answer was a 50-page PowerPoint 50-slide PowerPoint presentation. Show us, let
Right.
us see, feel, touch, be involved. So that was a very, very important note that we received a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and then of course, as everybody mentioned, survivor reunions at city council meetings and all sorts of things really does help as well. So
Yeah,
And
I think
go
that,
ahead.
one other important thing is, they love to hear what's happening in Tulsa, but they also really love to hear what's happening in their district. So we have all of our data reports, geofenced so that we can give them the number of calls, responses, all those brand affinity surveys. We make sure that there's, an equitable disbursement of respondents from each district. So we can give them a packet of information that is just about Council District 4. And they love that. I think also don't forget your state legislators, because the state legislators can wield a lot of power with the local officials, and building sort of for lack of a better word, a collective that supports you, so that they're hearing the same things when they confer with each other. Yeah, EMSA is great. Yeah, they're doing an amazing job.
And one of the things that I would mention is that these are public facing officials and they love good publicity. And so if you are going to build that relationship, make sure you are also calling them out and giving them that publicity on social media, on traditional media, whatever it may be. Make sure that people are seeing and appreciating the efforts they're going through to learn more about your agency, because that just strengthens your relationship. We've had plenty of events that we've done with local, state, and federal officials, and we're making sure we're tagging all of those social media accounts. We're making sure that if media is there, hey, you may want to talk to this official over here because this happened in their district. And doing that, just it shows the value that your agency has, not just to the community, but also to them politically. And it helps give them some much needed public positive publicity that they're seeking. So when it comes to them reaching out and doing these things, make sure, like Rob mentioned, you're getting a good picture with them and your crews and the ambulance. That you're tagging them on social media, that you're continuing to build that relationship. And we did that with one of our new city council members before they were even sworn in earlier this year. We had an event with the First Lady of Virginia, who was doing an initiative to combat the opioid epidemic. And we knew this was a topic that was of particular interest for this new city council member. So we invited her to this roundtable with the First Lady of Virginia, and that started to build that relationship that we now have, who's become one of our biggest advocates on city council. And that took place over time, did a ride along with our agency, and has become one of our biggest advocates. So just building that relationship and making sure you're publicizing the people that are your supporters and giving them their flowers goes a long way, especially with elected officials. And I don't know if Rob or Matt or Adam have any examples like I just mentioned.
yeah, when we first started one of our community paramedic programs, Congressman Mark Vesey, who came from a very uh, economically diverse district, we reached out to his office and he came and rode with our community paramedics. And we took pictures and videos and we notified the local media that he was riding along with one of our community paramedics, got media releases from the patients that the CP was going to be visiting that day. And at the 6 o'clock news, there's Mark Vesey, the congressman, riding with one of our mobile healthcare units, talking about how amazing the program is. And every time we go to DC or he's in the local district, he has been a huge supporter. So because we tagged him on our social media, we gave him media coverage because we notified the media that trusting partnership that Mark was going to be out riding, and they came and actually interviewed him. It was almost like a little mini press conference, and he loved it.
Mark, if I may, I'm actually going to put you back on the spot because, of course, the fantastic media opportunity you had with your Ambulance for Ukraine and then how you structured the press conference and who you had to come and talk, I think was actually a prime example of this.
Yeah, so we were one of the agencies that donated one of our ambulances that was cycling off, that was due to be retired, to ambulances, U.S. ambulances for Ukraine. And so we knew that, well, I knew that this was a topic that was very important to our senators. And so we invited Senator Mark Warner to come and speak at the event. And then we had all of our city council members that were invited. We also had all of the state representatives. Around our area that were invited as well. And then we invited all of our partners as well. And that turned out to be a fantastic event with media, fantastic social media. It crossed so many different organizations. We partnered with the Virginia Hospital and Healthcare Association, who got a bunch of hospitals across the state to donate medical supplies that were put in the back of the ambulance. So all the hospitals that were involved, we made sure we tagged them as well. And when we're talking about, making sure you're giving people flowers and making sure you're developing those relationships, it's not just the elected officials, but it's also your partners. It's also the people that you work with, because they may have a relationship that you don't have with somebody else that you may not even realize that may come to fruition later on, and you may need them. If you have a relationship and you're strong relationship with American Red Cross or the American Heart Association, and you have a great relationship with them, and then you may need some support from someone you don't have a great relationship with, but you know that they do have a great relationship with one of your partners. You can reach out to your partner and say, hey, would you be able to introduce us and just let them know that you guys have worked with us in the past, and have that intro so we can have that connection and then start to build a new relationship. It goes beyond when we're talking about building relationships. You really have to have tentacles all over the place, because you never know when some of those relationships may bear fruit in the future. Anybody else have anything they want to talk about? And again, we're opening this up. It doesn't have to be about politics. It can be about anything, communication. I do want to bring one thing up. And when it comes to building up that reputation and protecting the reputation of an organization, I think making sure you're also educating your employees is a huge part of that. And the reason I mention that is we've seen a lot of people across many different fields in the past couple of weeks, unfortunately, lose their jobs because of something they posted emotionally on social media. And we just had our new employee orientation. And one of the things that we talk about in new employee orientation is making sure that you're not posting anything on social media in an emotional state, because it usually never leads to anything positive. And immediately after some of the circumstances that we've seen in the past couple of weeks, I had a new employee come up to me and say, this is exactly what you were talking about. Like, it just clicked with me that when I'm seeing all these people lose their positions, this is what you were mentioning. And so when it comes to making sure you're protecting not just your organization, but also your employees, how much internal communication and education goes with that.
Mark, if I can just jump in here and just want to, I don't have the link to hand and maybe Matt can find it, but very recently, HR lawyer Scott Moore wrote a piece for EMS One on amendment rights, obviously in the shadow of the situation that you described, Mark. Obviously, there is a consult your own state laws, work out whether you're private or public, because of course sometimes that's different rules apply. But actually, Scott Moore's article in EMS One covers all of those areas from an HR law perspective, and I would commend that if you don't have a social media policy, or if you don't, you need to get one, start by reading that, and then obviously have a look at what your policies say. So there's some sort of start points there.
So Mark, how about a round robin as we wrap this up, and maybe do a couple of Q&A or do some Q&A, but get everybody's response to this question.
Yeah, why don't you start us off, man?
Be available, be proactive. Two big things.
Always pick up the phone.
Under promise, over deliver.
Just continue to build trust. And do we have any questions?
All right, let's see. We have a couple. Let me pull some up here. I'm gonna let's see. We're not screen sharing, right? Just want to make sure. Social media posts. Comments on or comments off when you post on social media from your official agency?
We leave comments on, mainly because that's great engagement. Social media obviously uses an algorithm to determine what's going to be presented to people. If you take away one of the main ways for people to interact with your post, you're only hurting yourself. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't go in and, if there's a comment that, is defamatory or, is inciting violence, of course, we're going to delete that comment. What we found though is that, we will have, great comments on our own posts, but it's posts that aren't native to EMSA. Maybe it's a news station post or, John Doe post. But we found that our team members come to our defense, and our team members are setting the record straight, and our team members are correcting a false narrative. So that's been great. But I think for the most part, comments are good.
Actually, Matt, can I add to Adam's comment? I recently wrote an op-ed for EMS One based on something that happened in Galveston with their police department, and it was about a misunderstanding of what we in EMS do on the scene of a cardiac event versus, say, a trauma event, and that's the basic: do we stay or do we go? And initially, the comments that came up were exceptionally negative towards EMS, but in fact, many providers jumped on to do that explainer, which indeed then prompted me to write an op-ed on, hey, listen, this is how we do what we do and why we do it. And I've had a lot of comments back saying, well, thank you for that. And sort of, not putting the record straight, but just kind of explaining the difference. And perhaps the follow on from that is how we educate our colleagues, perhaps in law enforcement, on what we do when we get onto scene. And I know that a lot of folk will, for example, send a truck to the police academy to explain what it looks like, or have the cops come into your own orientation to play the cops in exercises, etc. But actually establishing that familiarity and then allowing folk to explain, in this case, started really bad. And actually the providers jumped in to say, hey, no, that's not the situation. So there we go.
And I will say that we have a social media policy for our employees, and we also have a social media engagement policy for people participating in our social media. And so we welcome comments, but if you violate any of the engagement policies, then we will either hide or delete your comment. And that's not to say that we don't want negative comments, but if you are going off on a tangent that doesn't have anything to do with the topic that we posted, well, that has nothing, well, we're not going to engage with that. And that doesn't just protect us, but it's also about protecting the other people in the public that are making comments. They want to be able to do it in a positive way, in a way that's productive. And our social media is not there to have members of the public be attacked either. And so we want to have those productive conversations and engagement. And again, it's not about making sure we don't have negative comments, but it's got to be respectful and it's got to be on topic.
Yeah, and just make sure you're engaging with your legal counsel if you're a public entity, because those are official communications, and you want to make sure that you're not endangering, any sort of, essentially information loss by deleting a comment.
Any other questions, Matt, as we wrap up here?
That was it.
Okay, great.
There were some questions. The handouts will be available. A link to the handouts in the recording will be emailed to all attendees and also posted on AMI's website.
Well, thank you all for being here today. I think we got through a lot of different topics. I appreciate everyone on the panel's time for and their insight on all these topics. Definitely gonna take some of these ideas, Rob.
Yeah, I was just going to say that for those that are watching and following us along, the next AIM High board meeting is actually taking place in Washington, D.C. during the AAA Stars of Life. So the board members will be there. If you want to talk to us about AIM High or anything that you've heard today, come and catch us in DC and during the AAA Stars, I think in the first week of November.
And I am sure that all of us are open to speaking to any of you at any time, should you have any communications questions, beyond, we're happy to share those. And we're all in this together. So we love speaking with you all and supporting in any way we can. So feel free if you'd like to reach out to any of us for any questions or for us to expand on any of the things we mentioned in today's presentation.
And finally, please make sure that you visit emsintel.org, where we are actually capturing all of the news stories around EMS. We've categorized them, they're searchable. So if you have an issue that happens to you in your news market and you want to actually reference the wider EMS sort of universe to say it's not just us, it's happening elsewhere, visit emsintel.org. And we've got, what, Matt, over 3,000 individually curated items and articles now that will help you along.
Spot on. Thanks, Mark. Great job.
Thank you.